Hi, I'm Risa Starr, the Executive Director of the Longevity Biotech Association. I'm very excited to welcome you all to a discussion with Bill Greene, the Chief Investment Officer at Hevolution. Dr. Greene has had leadership positions as a founder, a biotech executive, an investor, and a clinician. He's really spanned the whole industry. As CEO, he built iconic therapeutics through discovery, clinical development, and venture financing, leading to a successful sale of the company. He later helmed longevity biotech company Fountain Therapeutics and co-founded digital therapeutics startup Pear Therapeutics. Dr. Greene also spent 12 years at MPM Capital, responsible for biotech and medical technology investments worldwide. He was also a founding chairman and head of the investment committee at the Global Health Investment Fund. Earlier in his career, Dr. Greene was an assistant professor of medicine at UCSF and led clinical trials and strategy for a variety of therapeutic areas at Genentech. Dr. Greene earned his BA from Wesleyan University and his MD from UCSF. He was a Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar at Yale and a Howard Hughes Medical Institute Research Scholar at the U.S. National Institute of Health. We're so excited to finally get a chance to talk to you. And with that, I will turn it over to Jim. And a reminder, please send your questions to Bill Douglas through the chat. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Risa, and thanks everyone for attending. We now have over 30 members of the paid up members of the LBA, and I know that everyone on this call and beyond will be excited to talk to Bill Greene, because Hevolution has really shaken up the Geroscience industry, and it's going to be great for he and I to talk about what the dynamic of Hevolution is and how it's going to help the industry going forward. As Risa has pointed out, Bill has an amazing CV. He's an epidemiologist. I think I've pronounced that correctly. And when Bill and I meet in London next month, we're going to meet in the famous John Snow pub, which is the pub where John Snow, or near that area where John Snow worked out how cholera was spread, and is one of the world's most famous epidemiologists, and so it's going to be totally appropriate that we meet there. Bill, I think your CV carries so much weight that we don't need to talk in detail about that, and we're very lucky to have you on board today. But just a reminder that questions today will be done via the chat function, so just put your questions in the chat, and we'll come to them towards the end of this conversation, which will last about 20 minutes. And I want to start off by asking Bill to give us a bit of background on Hevolution Foundation and its core mission. What sets you guys apart from the fast evolving landscape of health and the rapidly growing industry of longevity, Bill, in your opinion?
Thanks for that question. And let me just start by thanking you and the LBA for having me here today. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak with you about Hevolution, tell you a little bit about some of the things that excite me about Hevolution and what we're going to be doing there. I couldn't be more excited about Hevolution. And in particular, one of the things that really excites me about it is, I think, what does set us apart, which is Hevolution is built as and grounded in being a global nonprofit organization. And each of those words is important. We're global. This is a global issue, a global problem, a global industry. Everything we do comes from the ethos of impact and benefit for humanity. And that's why we were founded and run as a nonprofit. And we're run as, having said that, as a business organization with a great team that is meant to be really quite serious about the business we're in. We're all about catalyzing both an expansion of research in the Healthspan arena and development, bringing that to practice, reducing it to practice, bringing diagnostics, therapeutics, and solutions to people, so that we can quite explicitly enable a paradigm shift for a future where we look to Healthspan, healthy lifespan, and really enrich lives around the world. Our mission is really all about enhancing health span. Our objectives are really three: expand the array of effective treatments for diseases associated with aging, compress drug development timelines, especially in the health span arena, and really importantly, and one of the reasons that I'm here at Hevolution and so excited about it, making these life-improving therapies accessible to everyone. And that accessibility is, I think, in some ways, a distinguishing feature also that permeates everything that Hevolution does.
That's fantastic. So everyone on the call is familiar with the fact that Hevolution has a big budget. And it's a almost perpetual budget, at least in terms of our careers, because it's funded for at least 20 years. So that's a wonderful thing. But in practice, how do you see the Hevolution Foundation working? Is it going to work with companies or research institutions, or is it going to self-develop products? I mean, what is your strategy in terms of deploying this very substantial amount of capital that you have?
So great question. And to some extent, the answer is yes. Yes to all the above. What we have implemented so far, we're early in our journey. As you all know, we really unveiled this publicly just a year ago and are still building the senior leadership team to execute on the strategy. Having said that, I think many of you know that what we've publicly put out there so far is support for researchers, individual grants, partnerships with research institutions and academic institutions. So first line of business, if you will, is expanding the scientific knowledge base in healthspan and aging research. And that's going to be a North Star and a continued focus of what we do for the long term. So grants, grant making, academic partnerships, big piece of what we do. So that's number one. Number two, working with companies, definitely working with companies, potentially in a flexible manner, but we'll start with the traditional manner. In order to enable a future where we bring this new knowledge to people, we have to start companies, we have to invest in companies, and we have to support the healthspan biotech ecosystem, which clearly needs support. This is an area that's at various times been invested in by generalist biotech investors, and at other times they've been more shy. We're here for the long run. We're here to support this growing industry. So you'll see us, and this is the piece that I get to play a big role in, starting companies, investing in early stage companies, supporting companies through first the traditional manner, which is venture capital investment alongside ideally our other venture capital brethren, but being able to support companies financially through several parts of their growth and life cycle. You asked about developing our own products, doing our own research. Those are all potentially on the table. We haven't built out or announced anything along those lines yet, but as a comprehensive convener and catalyst in this space, I would say one of the hallmarks of what we're doing as a team is being idealists, being pragmatic idealists, but also being open-minded. I think we're interested in many ways, and part of what I think that we can do that is particularly interesting is we don't have to live in silos. We don't have a science team that does science, an investment team that does investment, an implementation team that thinks about patients. We think that all those artificial silos and barriers between things like science and companies are not only unproductive, but are simply wrong-headed and not going to help anybody to build the future we want to build. So we're committed to advancing and extending knowledge, making it available to people, and doing so as quickly as possible. And in that light, I think we'll be looking at a variety of perhaps even non-traditional funding, financing, and partnership mechanisms that take a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B.
Well, you're definitely an expert in that, and the fact that you've got such an illustrious commercial career speaks to the depth, and of course Mehmood Khan as well speaks to the depth of the top management in Hevolution. Before we get into some specifics on what you're actually doing right now, perhaps you could talk about the Global Healthspan Summit and what your goals are for that summit and when it's taking place and what sort of participants you're looking for in that particular event.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the real objectives of Hevolution is to be a catalyst and convener for not only leaders in the healthspan and longevity science space, but actually for leaders in a variety of endeavors and functions and talents to come together to really both talk about where we're at and imagine both a future, but also imagine projects that can bring us to that future. So the Global Healthspan Summit, which will be November 29th and 30th in Riyadh, our headquarter home city, is going to bring together leaders from a variety of areas around the world. And yes, of course, there'll be scientific leaders. There will be biotech and investment leaders, but there will be bioethicists. There will be policy experts. There'll be a variety of people who really are coming together to focus for 2 days on health span, longevity, to focus on it as both a global problem and a global opportunity. So to that light, we're looking for all sorts of people to come. Certainly everyone on this call, I'd love to see you all attend. It's going to be a good size conference. It's going to span 2 days with lots of content and lots of opportunity for informal meetings as well. I can talk more about it, but that's the big picture, and it's definitely a global event. We've got many speakers now coming from several continents, and I think it's going to be a real marquee event, and I believe it may be the key convening event in our space.
Well, that's fantastic, and that's all been achieved within, as you said, a very short period of time. And I'm sure that plenty of people on this call will want to come and will be in touch with you about how they can come. Practically, I know that you've done some grant work so far, or you've made some grants. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the grants you've made so far, or are they stealth mode, or are you able to talk about those right now?
Well, personally, I'm not particularly competent to tell you about individual grantees and individual projects. That's simply not my area of expertise. We have a fantastic chief scientific officer, Felipe Sierra, who was at, as many, maybe perhaps most of you know, ran the Division of Aging Biology at the National Institutes of Aging for some time, and is in fact, literally, I believe, the person who invented the term Geroscience and is one of the founders of Healthspan. So he's our chief scientific officer. He's the architect of our philanthropic grant-making program, and he could talk about that in depth. Somewhat broadly, what I can say is that the sorts of grant programs that we've publicly launched thus far and our funding involve, for example, inviting investigators who have submitted grants to the NIH in the US, been scored highly, but purely for funding reasons didn't make it to the so-called pay line of grants. So we invited them to apply to Hevolution to have their potentially groundbreaking research funded by us. And that's been really notable project. I'm really excited about that. And there are several other grant programs in the works and ready to be rolled out.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I can tell you, I just came from Dubai today, and the temperature there is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Because we've got an American audience, I'm using Fahrenheit, 45 degrees Celsius. But in Riyadh in November, the temperature will be much, much lower, and it's a pleasant time to go. So don't be put off by the fact that it's boiling in the Gulf at the moment. It will soon turn cooler, which is great. So do you have an amount of money that you are able to talk about that you're spending, or is, we talk, the headline news was $1 billion a year each for 20 years. Is that something that's going to evolve over time and is not set in stone, or is that a budget that you can work with on an annual basis? In other words, is there a fixed amount of money, or is it variable according to the opportunities that you see?
Well, first of all, that's a big number, and I could definitely work with that budget. I will also tell you it's not this year's budget.
Right.
What those numbers that have been out there speak to is the real significant, unwavering commitment of Hevolution and its board of trustees to this mission and to making a long-term impact. That, I think, there's no question about. With respect to specific numbers about how much grants we're going to be giving out this year versus next year versus the year after, investments that we'll make this year, next year, and the year after, what I can tell you is we're walking before we run. We're running, but at least we're running at some reasonable pace before we get to total scale. But we're growing rapidly and we're scaling rapidly. Furthermore, we anticipate increasing our budget each year during the first few years as we ramp up. And there's some aspect of putting capital to work, whether it's in grants or investments, in a responsible way. The field has to be able to absorb investment. And again, whether that's investment in science, scientists, companies, et cetera, in a way that's productive. So we are being thoughtful about how much we put out each year for the first couple of years here. We're being careful about it, but we are ambitious, and our ambitions are not inconsistent with what you've talked about. We don't publish our yearly budget or what we're going to be doing in any particular quarter. What I can tell you, and what I've started to tell both companies and other venture capitalists, is as you think about Hevolution and investments, think about us as a real solid mid-sized life science venture capital firm. We've got the scale and the ability to invest in companies, stay invested in them, support them through their life cycle, and build a real diversified portfolio. So it's a good, solid, adequate budget to do our work.
Well, it's a very significant budget in the context of the Geroscience industry. It's probably the biggest of all, and it was a big shot in the arm for the industry when it was announced, and it was an even bigger shot in the arm when the quality of the team that you guys are assembling has been progressively announced. So it's very, very good news. So I'm going to ask you what will be my last question, and then hopefully we'll get some questions through the chat, which is basically, in 5 years' time, if you look back, what would you hope to have achieved at Hevolution, both you personally and also for the organization as a whole? And what would you think would be milestones in the industry that we should be all collectively, the LBA and all its members and Hevolution Foundation and everyone else, aiming to achieve? I mean, I don't think we're going to solve the issue of Healthspan within 5 years, but what progress will we have made in within 5 years, in your opinion, Bill?
Great question, and you've touched upon something that's important to me, which is an effort. Well, a problem of this scale. You mentioned how hot it is in the summer in many parts of the world, the Middle East and others. Look, climate change is a big problem, no question, but healthy aging is the climate change crisis of human biology. I mean, this is a big deal. And given that, we can't afford not to be ambitious. We can't afford not to be idealistic. We can't afford not to aim high. Having said that, overpromising is always a mistake. So I don't think you're going to hear me or us say, we'll solve Healthspan in 5 years. Of course not. Having said that, we must make visible progress. So I'll take your question in two parts. First, what does the field look like in 5 years? What does Healthspan look like in 5 years? And second, what are the results, the fruits of investing in venture capital in Healthspan and building a venture capital ecosystem in Healthspan look like in 5 years? So for the field in general, I think it's very important that public awareness, policymaker awareness, industry leader awareness of Healthspan really be at the forefront. I would like to see governments thinking about this. I'd like to see policymakers tackling the financial implications of this for their and our people. And I'd like to see the pharmaceutical and biotech industry R&D leaders really embrace aging and aging biology as a significant piece of what they're looking at. Cancer is important. This is just as important. So I'd like to see at pharmaceutical research institutes and in pharmaceutical R&D organizations, verticals looking at this. For our investment function, fruits of our investment function, look at a practical, tactical level, I'd like to see other mainline life science investors investing alongside us in companies doing Healthspan research and developing Healthspan projects. I'd like to see companies embracing that as potentially approvable indications. And as a real practical outcome, I'd love to see within 5 years the first approved product, regulatorily approved product for a Healthspan indication, as opposed to for a specific disease indication that then could be applied to Healthspan. And that requires courage on the part of R&D leaders. It requires some, maybe not as much as we all might fear, but some regulatory research and regulatory innovation. And I think it's achievable, and I think that would be a singular achievable goal.
That's great. I mean, I completely agree with you that that we really need to solve this problem, because along with climate change, it is the single most important thing in the world today. By 2070, more than half of the developed world will be over 65 years old, and we have to do something, be it preventative medicine or whatever, to make sure that those people aren't burdened with lots of comorbidities and that the whole economic system sinks under the weight of too many old people and too few young people. It's also the case that as early as 2040, given the current trajectory, more than a third of US GDP will be devoted to healthcare expenses, which again is just not sustainable. And so what you're doing is really, really important, and I wish you Godspeed. Now, we do have a question from my friend James Pyer, I think everyone's friend on this call. How does Hevolution think about your focus on the Geroscience hypothesis, making therapeutics that increase health span versus age tech and social policies, keeping older people healthier with other technologies? So I think you've answered a bit of that, Bill, but maybe you could just amplify your answer on that one.
Yeah, good question. And there's a couple different aspects embedded in that question. So first, how do we think about investing in geroscience per se? And perhaps second, how do we think of, if I heard this correctly, how do we think about investing in biopharmaceutical, biotech solutions as opposed to other types of solutions? Perhaps I'll take the second one first. Healthy lifespan and increasing the quality, eventually quantity, but the quality of life and the years of expanding the years of healthy life and compressing the years of chronic disease and disability is clearly an opportunity in many innovative areas. We today are talking about biotech, pharmaceutical R&D, geroscience. That's important. Clearly, other types of technologies and solutions from very low tech to very high tech are important, and I think they're all relevant. And as we think about bringing science to people, there may be any number of adjacent areas that are important to be cognizant of and supportive of to make it happen, including social engineering. So couldn't agree more. It's a lot to bite off for one investment team. So we are focusing today on biopharmaceutical, biotech innovation, translating the kind of basic science that we're supporting to companies and to pharmaceutical and biotech R&D. To take that first one, geroscience, the geroscience hypothesis is very important. We absolutely see opportunity and are studying deeply the so-called hallmarks of aging, the pathways that by which aging goes bad, if you will, to lead to disease. We think that's important. We fundamentally buy into the geroscience hypothesis, and one particular reason we do is that by focusing on fundamental underlying biology and addressing how that biology, when it goes wrong, if you will, leads to pathophysiology and then disease, is that innovations that we support there and discoveries that we make there are likely to have benefit across diverse diseases, sometimes hopefully leading to insights that are surprising, insights in cancer that lead to improvements in kidney disease, insights in dementia that lead to improvements in pulmonary disease, and on and on. So we're believers in the geroscience hypothesis. Having said that, we're not restricted by that. In fact, some of the most interesting things that we're talking about as potential investment opportunities extend to two things that I'll speak about just for a moment. One are not just the established hallmarks of aging, but what about the emerging hallmarks of aging? What about new pathways, new insights into how cells, tissues, and organs grow, age, and die that could be important? We think keeping a close eye on emerging hallmarks of aging is important, and we'll do work there too. And second, so-called advanced modalities. We're not specifically a regenerative medicine fund, but having said that, epigenetics, regenerative medicine, stem cell biology, these things, precision medicine certainly, are very important and are going to play a role here. Sometimes people may look a little quizzical and say, well, if you're trying to solve a species-wide underlying fundamental problem of aging, how does precision medicine play a role? Well, it plays a role because we all age differently, and even our diseases of aging may manifest differently. So we think that areas like precision medicine are super important as fundamental technologies that can then be applied in our area.
Fantastic. So I don't think we've got any more questions, but I do want to strong arm you, or sort of corral you into agreeing that perhaps in a year's time, Bill, we could do this again and we could update the group on what's happening at Hevolution over the next year or so, looking backwards again. Would that be okay with you?
Well, it would be my pleasure. I'm really excited about LBA and the group that you've built here, and I think I'd love to come back and keep you updated. You know, I just saw a question pop up that is fairly
Yeah.
specific. I'll take a moment to answer it and then turn it back to you, Jim. The question was, would we invest in IPOs? Well, generically, we're not here to be investment bankers or that, but specifically for an individual company, we certainly can. There's nothing in our charter that prevents us from doing it. And where I would expect perhaps to see that happen first is companies that we invest in that help grow. Some of those companies should grow and be in a position to become public companies. And I would love to see us be able to invest in those companies throughout their life cycle, from seed stage investing to getting into translational medicine, investing with perhaps different investors, getting into the clinic. And if there's an opportunity and or need for us to support that company through the IPO, I see no reason not to.
Fantastic. Well, with that and your very kind agreement that we can do this again in about a year's time, and I'm anticipating our meeting in London. And thank you so much, Bill. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And we thank Hevolution for all the work it's doing in the field. It's really important, and it's been a wonderful bolt out of the blue for the Geroscience industry. So many thanks to you, Bill, and all your colleagues for all the stuff that you're doing.